Hey, I'm Pat. Welcome to CS Connect Bible U. Today we're going to talk about this important subject of justice. Justice is a word that is thrown around a lot today. If you've been watching the news at all these past weeks and months, you've heard the word dissected, debated, and analyzed. It's a word that you and I as Jesus followers better understand. Why would I say that? Because it's not an option for us. Micah chapter 6 verse 8 is one of my favorite verses, and the background to it is that God is, through the prophet Micah, talking to the nation of Israel. And the nation of Israel were doing a lot of the religious practices. If you read the earlier chapters of Micah, they were tithing, they were going to the temple, they were fasting, they were worshiping, they were singing, they were studying the Torah. But God is saying, you're missing the point of what all those religious practices are supposed to do. And so we get to Micah chapter 6, verse 8, and God says, He has showed you, O mortal, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, not recommends, not requests, what God requires of you, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. In Isaiah chapter 58, it's the same thing. God is talking to the nation of Israel, and He's saying to them, you're fasting, you're doing these religious practices, but you're missing the point. And listen to this, Isaiah 58, verse 6. No, this is the kind of fasting I want to see, God says. Free those who are wrongly imprisoned. Lighten the burden of those who work for you. Let the oppressed go free. Remove the chains that bind people. Share your food with the hungry and give shelter to the homeless. Give clothes to those who need them, and do not hide from relatives who need your help. Justice is something that we see from cover to cover in here. See, we don't have a choice on whether we are to act justly. And if that's true, then it begs the question, what exactly does that mean? What does the word justice mean? What does it look like for you and me to act justly? Here's three definitions that may help. Number one, justice is to see things through the eyes of God, meaning when you see injustices through God's eyes, you cannot help but say this is not just. When you see that there are children dying of malnutrition, and yet we have enough food to feed every human on this planet, 2,700 calories, when you see that through the eyes of God, you cannot help but say this is not just. When you recognize that right down the road from where you live tonight, there will be underage girls that will be raped for profit, when you see that through the eyes of God, you cannot help but say this is not just. Second definition of justice that may help us is justice is to care about what Jesus cared about. When we read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, when Jesus was here on earth, what were the things that He cared about? Where did He pour His time and effort and passions? What did He speak about? In Matthew chapter 23, Jesus says, He's talking to the religious leaders saying, you tithe a tenth of your mint, dill, and cumin, but you miss the more important matters. One of them is justice. The third definition that may help us is to connect the idea of justice to the idea of shalom. Shalom is a very important word to the Jewish people. If you were to visit a local synagogue or travel to Israel, you would find it is a common greeting. Hello and goodbye in Hebrew is shalom. They greet every Sabbath. Once a week on Saturday, their Sabbath, they greet it by Shalom Shabbat. Shalom Sabbath. When the Old Testament prophets spoke about the coming Messiah, they would often speak about Him ushering in shalom. Why does this word shalom help us understand what justice is? Because the basic meaning of shalom isn't just peace, it's the way things ought to be. It's when the prophet wrote down about the Messiah ushering in shalom, and he said the lion and the lamb will one day lay down next to each other. The child will play next to the cobra's necks. That's shalom. That's the way things ought to be. And so justice is seeing things through the eyes of God. Justice is caring about what Jesus cared about. Justice is fighting and praying and struggling and wrestling, sometimes even bleeding to make things how they ought to be or how they will be someday. So in the light of the current events, I found myself up in the middle of the night wrestling with this idea of justice. And I came up with 10 things that we must know about biblical justice. My problem as I was writing this is that every time I wrote one, it seemed that there was a counter idea. So I came up with an idea. You remember those old Choose Your Adventure books? Some of you remember these. They sold millions in a matter of years. And it was where you would come to the end of a chapter and then you would make a choice on what happened next. Do you choose this adventure, turn to page whatever, or choose this adventure and turn to page whatever? So in response to the current events, I came up with 10 things we must know, but at the end of each of them, I tell you to look at another number because they're tied together. So 10 things we must know about biblical justice. Number 1, truth is not relative. Truth is not relative. Facts do not care how you and I feel. Truth is truth, whether you and I believe it or not. See number 5. Truth number 2, you have no choice. Truth number 2, you have no choice. If you are a Jesus follower, you do not have a choice on whether you should act against injustices. Micah chapter 6:8, he has showed you, O mortal, what is good and what the Lord requires of you to do justice. See number 2 and number 6. Truth number 3, racism does not make sense from a biblical worldview. Racism does not make sense from a biblical worldview. God created one race, the human race, in his image. Therefore, every human that you and I lay our eyes on, regardless of their color, their gender, or what uniform they wear, has inherent value simply because they carry the fingerprints of our Creator and are the pinnacle of his creation. See number 8. Truth number 4, God's plan is you. Truth number 4, God's plan is you. God's primary plan for justice is to act through us, not to us. I'm going to say that again. God's primary plan for justice is to act through us, not to us. See number 2. Truth number 5, listen and learn. Truth number 5, listen and learn. Your experiences are not the same as someone else's experiences. We must listen to understand more than listening to be understood. We must listen to understand more than listening to be understood. See number 9. Truth number 6, injustices are complex issues. Injustices are complex issues. Most issues of injustices are incredibly complex, like onions. There are layers and layers within every systemic injustice. There are no simple answers, but that does not excuse us from doing something. See number 1 and 2. Truth number 7, you should feel some discomfort. You should feel some discomfort. If you aren't uncomfortable, you probably aren't dealing with the depths of the injustice. When we dig into the cause and effect of most injustices, it will bring some discomfort for anyone and everyone. See number 9. Truth number 8, it's not either or, but and. Let me say that again. It's not either or, but and. God has always loved all people. And, not but, and God has always loved all people, and there has always been a special place in his heart for the poor, the oppressed, and the marginalized. See number 1 and 3. Number 9, it takes humility. You may have some answers to the problem, but you do not have all the answers. If you think you have all the answers, you need to ask God for some humility. See number 5. Number 10, it will feel overwhelming. It's true that you can't do everything, but you can do something. See number 2 and number 4. You can't do everything, but you can do something.
Oh, baby,